Hi, this is Ken Parker, welcoming you to another episode of Common Ground, the policy roundtable where we bring together a panel with diverse views on issues of concern to Newton residents and try to hammer out some of our differences. For those of you who are new to the show, let me introduce the format. First, I introduce a topic. Then we go around the table once, with each panelist expressing a viewpoint. I then select the two panelists who disagree the most strongly and ask them to speak directly to one another in hopes of finding some area of agreement. At the end of each segment, I put in my 2 cents and give an assessment of how we did at finding common ground. Tonight, I will have no difficulty selecting the two panelists who disagree the most strongly, since we have two panelists, and the exciting panelists they are. I'll be introducing them in a moment. And longtime viewers of our show will recall that in the olden days, we used to sometimes squeeze in a little bit of a commentary section to the show as well. So I'm going to resuscitate the commentary, or resurrect it as the case may be, and do a very brief commentary just to lead off the show with I think a timely issue that our viewers are mostly pretty interested in. So without further ado, let me introduce tonight's absolutely fabulous panel. On my left is Lisa Gordon. Lisa, welcome to Common Ground.
Thank you for having me.
Lisa is a leader of a nonprofit by day and a candidate for office by night, and probably a lot during various days as well, I would imagine, because that's the life of a candidate. Lisa, you run a regional, is it a food bank or?
It's actually a food pantry.
Food pantry.
So there's the Greater Boston Food Bank, and they supply pantries, and I run one of the pantries that benefits from working with the food bank.
I should really get that terminology right. I spent a summer traveling the country researching hunger and malnutrition in American cities.
Oh, wow.
And we talked to people at food banks and food pantries, and so I ought to have gotten that right. But anyway, the very exciting thing for Newton residents is not only that you're doing that great work for the food pantry, but that you're running for office in Newton for our city council, and you're running at large from Ward 6, which of course is something near and dear to my heart, because that's a seat, or one of those two at large from Ward 6 seats that I held for 18 years. So congratulations on your run, and it's fabulous to have you in the race. And full disclosure to our audience, I have endorsed and have a sign on my yard for Lisa. And if she's asked me, probably made a donation, although I
Not
don't.
yet.
Not yet. Oh wow. Well, that'll be coming soon then. Anyway. Well, thank you for being on the show, and thank you so much for putting your hat in the ring.
Thank you for having me.
Our other panelist is Matt Hills. Matt, you've been on the show before.
Yes, I have.
So welcome back.
Thank you.
Matt has one of the most impressive resumes of not only anybody who's been at this table, but anybody I know. Matt has been a leader in finance and industry in a number of capacities, currently serves, I believe, on a number of corporate boards, and has a leading role in the campaign, I have to say, of the leading candidate for mayor of Newton, Mark Laredo. Are you the chair, treasurer? What do you do on that campaign?
I've been Mark's treasurer since 2001, and we've been very close friends for a lot of years, as have our families.
And you have any other role in the campaign, or
just as
advisor?
An advisor to Mark. There's a small group of folks who have been advising him since he started the campaign really a year and a half ago.
And again, full disclosure, I have endorsed Mark Laredo for mayor and have occasionally put my 2 cents in as to some of the issues facing the city. So I can't pretend that tonight we're getting both sides of either one of these races, but that's just the way things work out sometimes. Without further ado, I'd like to dive into, one thing before I dive into our first topic. So, as I think at least some of our viewers know, we've been doing this show since 2005, just over 20 years. It was, I believe, April or May of 2005. Spring of 2005, we started the show. And over the course of that time, a lot of people have sat around this table expressing their views. And throughout that time, we've all felt very good about being able to say things critical of policies and politicians. And and to freely express viewpoints. That's something that Americans have taken for granted for the entire length of our country since the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, were approved in the 1700s. So we're now into our what would this be? 17, 18, 19, into our well into our third century of having a First Amendment. And for the first time since we started this show, and for the first time in my lifetime, certainly, I feel like that First Amendment right is under threat. And ironically, from folks who say that they care very much about the First Amendment. But there is, I think, a very chilling phenomenon going on in the country, and without people say, oh, this is people call it what? Someone accused me of TDS. Do you know what this is? Trump derangement syndrome. It means you're exaggerating. He's not really that bad. So I think rather than my characterizing what his position is, I would think I just want to quote him on how he feels about letting people criticize him. I just watched today a video of Trump's remarks in the wake of the Jimmy Kimmel suspension / I don't know if it's a firing for his comments, for his recent comments on his show, for essentially a joke that, Trump said that if a network, talking about other networks in the future, if a network gave him bad publicity, quote, maybe its license should be taken away, it would be up to Brendan Carr, who of course is the chair of the Federal Communications Commission and is in charge of license. And he's the one who threatened ABC's license for Jimmy Kimmel's monologue. And to me, that doesn't sound like a speculative comment by our president. It sounds like instructions. And I think it has a terribly chilling effect. And I'm very concerned that already Stephen Colbert was let go because CBS, Paramount had a merger going on, and or most people think that was the reason. And I'm frankly concerned that tables like this here in Newton, Massachusetts, and around the country may not have the full and open exchange of viewpoints that we have come to rely on and expect in a democracy in the United States of America if this pattern continues. So I really can't have a show without commenting on that on this evening. With that having been said, we have a lot to get to, so let me jump right in to raise our first topic. So our topic number one is quite simply, we still have elections in this country, including in Newton, Massachusetts. So what is at stake in November's election? What will change one way or another depending on who's elected? This is, of course, for you, Lisa, is an opportunity to say what you're going to do and what issues you'd like to work on. And of course, Matt, I'd love to hear your insights onto not just the mayor's race and the city council, but also you were chair of the school committee, which I neglected to mention in the introduction. So let Lisa lead this off, though. Lisa, what do you think's at stake in this election?
This is an interesting election cycle because 2 years ago it was about MBTA Communities Act and the Village Center overlay design, and we are now in a space where we are seeing how that's played out. There have been about 50 houses that have been approved under the MBTA Act, and we're expecting to see a lot more. About 11% of housing has been approved in the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, 3,700 units. And there's things going on because, of course, in the MBTA Communities Act, it doesn't talk about affordable housing. And so there's talk now that the next council will be looking at lowering the threshold so that we can bring in some more affordable units, which I think will be an important discussion.
So you think affordable housing will be a big topic that will be affected by this election?
I believe that it's a topic that our community is greatly concerned with, and it's been a topic during every election cycle.
Is there anything else that will go one way or another based on this election that you want to mention? Like, in other words, what will be? Let me refine it for you. What will be different if Lisa Gordon is elected? That won't be that way if Lisa Gordon isn't elected.
So I really believe in collaboration, and I'm not going to come to the table necessarily with my mind completely made up on issues. And I think dialogue and working with people who have differing points of view is crucial for our community. And I do believe there are candidates who have ideas about ways that they would vote without looking at the nuance. And they are not outcome driven. They are more looking for what their ideas are and whatever the outcome may be.
They're not outcome driven, or they're not process driven?
They're not, okay, when I say outcome driven, meaning I don't think sometimes that the outcome is what they're concerned with. It's the way that they're voting.
Okay.
I know maybe that doesn't.
I know. Maybe I didn't fully understand, but I get what you're saying. They are not as collaborative as you. I think is your point.
Not as collaborative, but I would also say that. Could I give an example?
Sure, of course.
Okay, there was a vote about a gas line, right? So in theory, we're trying to do away with gas lines. However, without replacing this particular gas line.
So explain, what is this gas line for? Is it?
I think it's for providing gas to homes.
So, residential gas line.
Residential
underground
gas line
on a main street.
That needs to be fixed.
One of those things that they're always leaking gas.
They are,
okay, yeah.
and they need to fix it, okay?
Right.
But we haven't come up with the solution yet to get by without the gas,
right?
So do you fix the gas line that people need right now so that they can heat their homes? Or do you vote to not fix the gas line because you're just against gas lines?
Okay, and there are people who voted against fixing the gas line?
I'm saying,
the leaky gas line?
I'm saying that we have to think about what is the outcome we want to get there.
Has that actually happened, or is that just a hypothetical?
No, that actually happened.
People voted against fixing a leaky and dangerous gas line?
Correct.
In Newton?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. All right, well that's alarming.
And I'm not trying to throw this, but I'm just trying to give examples.
I guess I'm not keeping up. I would have thought I would have heard of that, but okay. Was this recently? No,
yes, and
okay.
It's not that I'm advocating for having gas lines.
No,
I'm
I get it.
advocating for not having
leaky gas lines.
Got
it.
While we work on a plan to transition correctly.
That's crystal clear, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Matt. How will this election affect the future of the city of Newton? You're involved in a campaign or two. What do you think?
I think there's a small number of races at the city council. There's obviously Mark has a competitor for mayor, but we believe there's a very good chance Mark's going to win. So I think
that is the most understated articulation of this race I have heard yet.
What do you expect me to do? Get up here and say,
yeah. No,
and
I think I will put it slightly differently for the sake of our audience. Mark has an opponent whose name will appear on the ballot. This person has run for office before, never been close in a race, doesn't appear to be running much of a campaign. Mark is running a top-notch campaign, and it would be the most shocking upset in the history of democracy, not just American democracy, but in the history of world democracy, if Mark Laredo were not elected the next mayor of Newton. That's my view on it, but go ahead.
Hey, it's your show. I mean, you can say how you want.
That's the way I would put it.
I would think.
There's an election. People will vote. You never know, but
I think. Let's talk about mayor, and let's talk about school committee races.
Okay. So for the premise of my question, let's assume Mark Laredo will be mayor. How will he be different from Ruth Ann Fuller?
So I'm not going to start comparing one person to the other. He's not running against her.
How is policy different?
So what I will say is this: Mark has, for the most part, run with little opposition, because I think Mark is a very credible, experienced person with a successful private sector career and serious leadership credentials in the public sector. He is a moderate, he is a centrist, he is not an ideologue. That is exactly the kind of person we need, given some of the financial headwinds that the city will face at increasing speeds for those headwinds.
Fair enough, Matt, but let me just put it another way. A lot of people who live in the city of Newton would say, hey, the trash gets picked up, the schools are good, the parks are relatively clean. That's what I care about. How will people notice the difference in the Laredo administration? What will be the tangible differences in the city of Newton? Or what would you like them to be?
I believe without any hesitation that difficult issues will be discussed and resolved without resort to ideological polarization. Mark is the opposite of an ideologically polarizing person. Whether we're talking about development, which is always a polarizing topic, whether we're talking about contract negotiations, particularly in the public schools, whether we're talking about how it is we're going to fund a very aggressive improvement plan for the Newton Public Schools. These are nuts and bolts issues, but the answers aren't, don't just jump out, and you need a solid, moderate, private and public sector oriented person to sort through options and bring most people in the community together. I think Mark said it best. He'd rather have 70% of what the right answer is, what he thinks the right answer is, if he has the vast majority of people agreeing with him, than have 100% of what he wants with 51% of the people agreeing with him. So I think what we're going to have are some really difficult issues that the city's going to have to deal with. Always financial issues, but not just financial issues. And I think Mark will do a really good job of keeping the temperature down and bringing people on board and getting people prepared to make the kinds of decisions and trade-offs that need to be made.
Well, you've given a perfect segue to what I want to ask you about. A lot of people in Newton, you said keep the temperature down. A lot of people in Newton feel like the biggest issue facing us, other than our political democracy issues, but for the fundamentally overwhelming challenge we face is dealing with climate change, getting the temperature down. And this is something in the environmental movement they talk about, think globally, act locally. There have been a number of initiatives on this front. I'm interested to hear what, if you know, what Mark's platform is on electrification, on reducing the city's reliance on fossil fuels, on reducing the public's reliance, the use of fossil fuels in Newton. Is that part of his platform?
He has spoken about that, and there's some of that on his website. I'm going to make a very general comment about it, and Mark can fill in the specifics, and yes, I've heard him speak about this before. Mark is actually quite open about the need to embrace climate initiatives that are pushed by the state and many municipalities, including Newton under Mayor Fuller, to deal with climate change. He's not someone who's taken what I would call kind of the opposite position at all. That's good. He also is very aware, going back to Lisa's example, that there's a goal and then there's the need to get to a goal without doing things that alienate people, dramatically raise costs for people in an instant. So, Mark is a practical person in the way he's dealing with this. He's absolutely embraced a lot of the initiatives, and I don't think he's driven by zealotry or ideology. He's going to be practical in the way he makes trade-offs on timing, in terms of requirements, how big buildings have to be before certain requirements kick in, and things like that.
Okay. I want to hear, you alluded to, Matt, you think there's some issues with the schools that will be, the school committee races will be important too. Before we get to that, I want to give Lisa a chance to weigh in on the climate change topic, because I know it's something I've heard Lisa talk about before, and I'd love to hear your vision, Lisa, for how you would want the city of Newton to be addressing it.
Well, one of the things I really want to look at is I would love to see the City of Newton have a biodiversity plan. We have got one now for the state, and we don't have one for the City of Newton. The thing that I find interesting about biodiversity is that when I look at things, I like to look at the full picture. So I talked about outcomes. I look at whatever it is that's being done, and I try to see it from all the different angles. So if you do this, how is it affecting this, and how is it implicating this? And without looking at that, we have a climate action plan that talks about buildings, but we don't, and we have a green space plan, but we don't link them. We don't talk about how making sure that we know what the trees are in our city and what we're replacing, what we're not, what invasive species are coming in, without looking at what farm. We do have some, garden plots that do create food.
We have Angino Farm, too.
Yeah, we have Angino Farm, and I know for a fact that people who have the Nonantum plots over off of Winchester, some of them grow their own food. I'm in food insecurity. I think that that's a really important aspect, that there's actually weeds up there that I didn't know about that people go and pull, and they can bring them home to eat them. And I would like to see a full plan that links in with our climate action plan that will help us make decisions. We've had a lot of contentious decisions, I know we've talked about, with do we have solar panels or do we have trees? And we have to be really thoughtful about how we make those decisions, and I predict that those kinds of discussions are going to come up more.
You're talking about the library parking lot controversy.
Yes, referencing that. I would also say that, we are dealing with a lot more flooding. Sewer issues are a much bigger deal in the city of Newton.
That's part of climate change, is rising water levels and more flooding, and of course mudslides, storms. Not something that we're going to be well equipped to deal with our current lack of work on infrastructure. But anyway, not to editorialize there, I want to give Matt a chance. First of all, do you want to respond to any of that, Matt? Yeah. Okay, then let me let you answer something that I find fascinating, because I know you had a lot of experience negotiating with the teachers union, and I think it's fair to say playing at least an advocate role, if not a leadership role, during the recent teacher strike. You were certainly very articulate. I remember an op-ed you wrote on this topic. And I've totally forgotten to mention, you're also vice chair of the Massachusetts Board of Education, correct?
Elementary and secondary
education. Right, not colleges, sorry.
Right.
I should clarify that. So which, of course, grows right out of your experience on the school committee. So you made some big decisions on that, you collectively as a body, during the pandemic in terms of when schools would reopen and whatnot. So you have a great perspective on what the big issues are on public education. So I want to know is, there's everyone running for school committee in Newton. It seems like they're nice. They're mostly parents. They care about their kids' education. Why does it matter which of these people get elected? What's at stake in this election, Matt?
I think there's a lot more at stake in this school committee election than there is in a typical school committee election. Typical school committee election, there might be 1 or 2 seats. They might be competitive. This is different.
1 or 2 contested races.
One or two contested races.
So you know what? I've neglected to mention, so this cycle, so everyone knows, there is a race for mayor, a contested race, because Al Ciccinelli is running, and so they're both, there's no incumbent running for re-election, so it's Al Ciccinelli and Mark Laredo running. For city council, there are 3 contested races. There's Lisa's race, Ward 6 at large, in which 3 candidates are running for 2 seats. The 3 candidates are Lisa Gordon, Ted Gross, and Sean Roach, and the other contested race is a city council, and the other citywide one that everyone in Newton gets to vote in is a Ward 4 at-large race. And I brought a cheat sheet because I'm going to have trouble pronouncing the names otherwise, but I believe the candidates are. There's one incumbent, Josh Krinsman, who's running for re-election. And, is this on the screen behind me? Great. The others are John Shemanis, perhaps, and Cyrus Damabed. I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. So everyone gets to vote for 0, 1, or 2 of those 3 candidates, and 0, 1, or 2 of the candidates in Lisa's race. Those are the 2 citywide contested alderman, or now city council races. Then we have 1 ward councilor contested race. You can only vote in this if you live in Ward 5, which is basically Waban and Upper Falls with a couple border issues there, but basically Waban and Upper Falls. And there, the Ward 5 ward councilor race is between Julie Irish and Gary Miller. So people in that neighborhood get to vote in that race. And then there are 4 contested school committee races, correct me if I'm wrong, that are all citywide races. And those are the races in Ward 2, where Christine Fisher and Linda Swain are the candidates. And of course, you can vote for 1 or 0 of those 2 people. Then in Ward 5, where Jenna Miara and Benjamin Schlesinger are the 2 candidates. Ward 6, where Molly Brott and Jonathan Green are the 2 candidates. and in Ward 8, where Victor Lee, sounds like victory, victory, and Jim Murphy are the two candidates. These names are probably largely not familiar to our audience, so to the extent that either of you knows any of these candidates and wants to share insights, that'd be great. But Matt, I interrupted you to introduce what those four races are. Now that we've identified the four races, why does it matter whether somebody votes for Jenna Miara or Benjamin Schlesinger?
So I think there's two critical issues that are at stake in this school committee. There's the school committee election. There is a financial, there's a set of financial challenges, and that's an understatement, that the schools are facing. And we need the right leadership to support a very popular superintendent, Anna Nolan, who's got an amazing game plan that she's trying to execute. The finances are out of whack with what the game plan's supposed to be, but you need a school committee that's committed to the values and the strategies that she needs to execute the plan. And not all candidates do. There's a second support that. There is a second issue, and that's what I'll call the issue of independence.
When you say not all candidates support that, what is it that not all the candidates support?
I think you've got a range of candidates that have a certain allergic reaction when it comes to data, when it comes to measurement, when it comes to accountability, when it comes to consistency in the way classes are taught across different schools and different grades.
So just to play devil's advocate,
are
are you saying, the way people say is they want an inclusion model and they want more equity? Is that what you're objecting to? Or
no.
Tell me what.
No.
What is the current policy, and do these people want to change, the ones that are allergic to data? Do they want to change the current policy, or do they not want to make a needed change? That's what I'm trying to understand.
It's not that there's a policy to use data or a policy not to use data. Mm-hmm. Any good superintendent, any good principal, any good classroom teacher is using data on a regular basis in order to make adjustments in what's going on.
Sure.
Not all candidates, just like not all players at the state level, support that sort of strategy. And you have certain candidates that have been very clear about what I will call an allergic reaction to what most of us would think of as a normal way that you run.
Can you give us an example, of an issue where someone said, I don't care what the data say, this is where I come out on it?
I think, and there's a group of candidates that I'm supporting.
You feel free to mention their names.
I will mention their names. I won't sort of specifically call out their opponents.
Okay, well, I can do that for you. No.
Ari Proya in Ward 1, whose candidate dropped out, but whose opponent dropped out, but her name's still on the ballot. So there's actually 5 technically contested races. So, Linda Swain in Ward 2. Jason Bardwaj in Ward 3, who's running unopposed. Ben Schlesinger in Ward 5. That's Alan Schlesinger's son. Jonathan Green in Ward 6. Alicia Piedelu of Canadian Quebecois heritage, so I got to call that out. Unopposed in my ward, Ward 7. And Victor Lee in Ward 8, who has an opponent.
So just to be clear, the 4 in contested races you're supporting are, which one are you supporting in Ward 2?
Ward 2 is Linda Swain.
Okay, let's just stop there. Why? What do you like about Linda Swain?
I think there's a common thread with all of these candidates, and I get back to the word I used before, independent. On paper, everybody says that they're independent. Nobody runs and says, oh, I'm not independent. But there has been an effort underway in the state, led by the Mass Teachers Association. They have been quite open about this. They have put $1 million into their independent expenditure PAC. They had a big press release at the beginning of August about it, and their objective is to elect candidates supported by local unions in this election. That is a staggering amount of money to spend in local school committee races. And you have people running for school committee. This is not just Newton. This is happening all over the state. It happened in Andover. It's happening all over. This is not a Newton-specific thing, but you have slates of candidates, like we do in Newton, that appear to be backed and soon may be formally backed by the local and state union. And I think that's a problem. It's not a problem to have any one person have a different point of view. It is a problem to have someone who is a group that has opposing views to the school committee in a collective bargaining context.
Okay. I think you've gotten now to what I wanted to ask you about. You say opposing views to the school committee in a collective bargaining context. I remember a time, and then I think it was this goes back a few decades, when I think we can say that most people in our community agree that teachers play a very valuable role in our children's lives, and I don't know if other people would agree with me that in terms of our priorities in society, teachers are severely underpaid for the amount of work they do as compared to many other professions where there's profit to be made. We tend to reward professions like mine, where lawyers, where there's companies making profit. Not that I work 10 times as hard as a teacher, but I might make a multiple of the income that a teacher makes. The same goes for people in your kind of financial world. Again, not that you don't work very hard. So what I would say is there is a temptation to try to make that fair. And historically, what people have done on the school committee sometimes is they have paid teachers beyond the city's means. And what I want to ask you about is whether you're concerned that's going to happen again, because that's put us in a tough position, because people say, hey, teachers deserve more. They've given raises that exceed the revenue growth under Proposition 2.5, and that's forced us to have larger class sizes and lower teacher-to-student ratios. Is that what you're worried about, Matt?
So let me kind of just be clear on this, because my issue isn't how much of a raise a teacher should get. It's having a budget having a strategy for the schools that fits within a budget.
Okay.
I have no view on how much of a raise teachers should be given. I want school committee members who don't support a strike that shuts down our schools for 11 days. I want school committee members that are not trying to hold up the school system in order to have unsustainable financial pictures.
One more follow-up.
I want school committee members that believe in supporting the educational priorities of one of the absolute best superintendents in the state instead of trying to hijack an agenda. And that is why I'm supporting the candidates, absolutely none of whom I knew before this election. I'm supporting the candidates that I've chosen to support.
So let me just ask you this, because you said something very interesting a moment ago, and then I'm going to let Lisa back into this conversation.
Sorry.
No, it's but it occurs to me. You said that you want a school committee that doesn't support an illegal strike. I'm not sure if those were your exact words, but something to that effect. And my recollection is that in the when we did have the illegal strike, a year and close to 2 years ago now, there was only one member of the school committee who was supporting the illegal strike, and the rest of the school committee were not. Am I remembering that correctly? Well, regardless of whether I am, are you suggesting that there are people running for the school committee who would support an illegal strike?
I will be blunt. There are candidates running for school committee, some of whom were very, very openly supportive of the teachers striking, raising money for a strike fund, lining up people to demonstrate. They're entitled to. Like
sure.
this is a free speech.
Management. I got it.
They should not be on the board of that's what it's called in most parts of the country, school boards. They should not be on the board of a major school system when their priority is not the students in the system. This is a bipartisan Democratic Republican view at the State Board of Ed, that it's about the students. It's certainly the view that Dr. Tutwiler, our Secretary of Education, has expressed.
Anna Nolan has certainly expressed it.
Kids need to be in the classroom. Governor Healy has expressed this. Lieutenant Governor Driscoll has expressed this. This is not some obscure point of view.
Matt,
they need to be in the classroom. And the people who are on the board of the school system need to be absolutely focused on resolving differences at the table, but not with sympathy to people who are keeping kids out of the classroom.
And it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, that you're not confident that all of the candidates for school committee would take that consensus view. Is that a fair characterization?
I am confident that not all the candidates would take that consensus view. So,
Okay. All right.
Let me kind of say it kind of not sort of two negatives in the sentence.
Okay, fair enough. So I was trying to soften
And
it.
that's
but-
why the candidates I listed that I'm supporting are the ones I'm
All right.
supporting.
And I'm sure there will be opportunity for the there are plenty of websites and things out there, but where would you point people to what website or source to read more about the candidates you're supporting?
You have to go to each individual candidates. This is not a slate here.
Right.
By the way, Mark has endorsed these candidates. Some
Mark
of whom,
Laredo.
Some of whom may have, as has Chris Bresky. Some of
The
whom,
former school committee chair.
Mark and Chris have endorsed these candidates. It's Ari Proya, Ward 1, Linda Swain, Ward 2, Jason Bardwaj, Ward 3. Tamika is running unopposed in Ward 4. In Ward 5, Ben Schlesinger. Ward 6, Jonathan Green. Ward 7, unopposed, Alicia Piedelu. And Ward 8, Victor Lee.
Okay, well, folks
Those are
can
the
Google those and Google their opponents. And by the way, the League of Women Voters has a website where people are answering statements about answering questions. I'd urge people to go to the League of Women Voters of Newton website, which links to candidate websites and their answers to questions, and gives you a sense of where the contested races are. So shout out to the League for all they do in that regard. Now. Lisa, I'm sorry, you've been very patient. I'm not going to make you weigh in on the school committee races. You're running for office. What I am going to ask you to do, though, is talk about how you think you as a city councilor, assuming you're elected, will be able to help make the Newton Public Schools stay excellent and maybe even get a little better.
Oh, well, I'm a huge advocate for the Newton Public Schools. My children graduated from Newton South High School, and I helped on a number of campaigns the first one was to save the music program at Newton South when it was coming under cuts, and then the next time was to save the elementary strings programs. And I feel very strongly that a healthy, thriving school system embraces athletics and music and the arts, because I think we have to recognize that when we talk about excellence in schools, there are all different kinds of learners. And I know when my son was at school that there were children who were not into the academics, but were incredibly gifted in other areas, athletics and music programs. And for them, that was the next step that they went to. And I felt like, and I feel like when those cuts come up, we have to think about creative ways to save those. So I'm a big advocate for that, and I will say that my daughter is a teacher, inspired. She just started her very first teaching job.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm
Mazel
very,
tov.
very proud. She's got 90 11th and 12th graders in Maine, and she was inspired by her teachers at Newton South. I would say were a direct result, aside from the fact that I think it was a calling. And I've talked to some of the candidates who are running for school committee, and the city councilors have a role as being advocates in making sure that we're looking at the budget. And yes, it's the mayor, and I have great confidence in the person that we think will be elected to make those decisions and make it easier on the council when we're looking at efficiencies and ways that we can increase the budget. And I would love to hear Matt's comments, because I know he has a lot of thoughts on the budget and how we're going to have to deal with a difficult situation. But as a councilor, I think we could also behave as advocates. So whatever it is that the mayor is looking at to make sure that we support the schools, we have to make sure that we're supporting what the mayor is looking to do. And I have great faith that Mark will take this very seriously and not take lightly any suggestions that he makes for a future budget.
All right. You've segued beautifully to the next thing I wanted to ask you both about, which is the city's finances. Now, we have been living in Massachusetts, every municipality has, since 1980, under Proposition 2.5, which limits the number one source of municipal revenue, property taxes, to 2.5% plus new growth every year, except where the municipality's voters choose to override or technically legally underride Proposition 2.5 to adjust that number or to temporarily adjust it through a debt exclusion or a one-time capital expenditure that gets added on to the tax rate. And so my question is, we know in Newton, and this has been clear over the years, that commercial property brings in a much higher amount of revenue than residential. It's taxed at a higher rate, also has lower costs to the system. There aren't kids in the schools of commercial property. So communities that have been more fiscally sustainable and have had better revenue are the ones that, like Boston, Cambridge, Waltham, the ones that have had a stronger commercial tax base. Newton, despite numerous committees and commissions and task force and blue ribbon and red ribbon and everything else that have said, hey, we need a stronger commercial tax base, it's something that almost everyone has said, has gone in the opposite direction, and the ratio of commercial to residential in the city has declined significantly over the last couple of decades. So my question to you is, what are you going to do about it? In other words, there's a couple of things you could do, right? You could try to move that ratio back the other way. You could override 2.5. You can cut services. What's your approach to dealing with this? What some people have called a structural deficit. I would call it a reality of Prop 2.5.
You're going to start with me, even though we know that Matt.
No. Go
No.
Hey,
you've told me.
Matt, you were on.
I'm just like a civilian, not an elected office. I'm an appointed guy at the state.
But it's a fair point, Matt, that you actually served on at least one of these genius groups, right? That said, did I get it wrong? You guys all said we need more commercial.
You said I have
revenue.
I've thought about this a lot, which is why I turned to you.
I'm happy to give some comments. I can't really address. I don't have the knowledge to address kind of how to tweak things to get more commercial, build more commercial space. Other than to say, I have been listening to Mark talk about this and argue with people about this and the need to do this since before I even understood why it was an issue. So this
you
is
think that Mark Laredo will be dedicated to increasing our commercial tax base in the city?
I think Mark has always been focused on, yes, residential, but not residential to the near exclusion of commercial. That to him is just simple economics. So that doesn't mean he's going to be focused on commercial without regard to residential. You cannot reasonably fix the finances of the city solely with residential. They don't have to always be in conflict. So this is where, again, I see kind of take the temperature down a little bit. By the way, we could want all the commercial space we want in Newton. Right now, there's a limited demand for it. That much I understand. So just saying we're going to build a bunch more commercial doesn't fix it. However, the financial issues facing the city, which are not unique to Newton in Massachusetts, the financial issues facing the city are not going to wait for Mark and the city council to, fix the commercial residential split. And I would just think of it very simply. We have an amazing set of residents with really high demands, whether it's making sure the trash is picked up, fixing the darn roads, and backing what is a really impressive and aggressive strategy for improving the schools. And these things all take...
When you say an impressive strategy, you mean Superintendent Nolan's strategy?
Yeah. And these things all take resources, and I think there's a real comfort and a misplaced comfort in a simplistic notion that this is just an advocacy issue. It's a political issue. We need to change the pension funding and all this free cash, and that'll... It is way, way, way more complicated. Those are pieces of it. Those are not pieces that will solve the financial headwinds that we are walking into, and that's before taking into account reductions in state and federal funding for the city. And there needs to be, and there will be, a day of reckoning that cannot simply be solved by stretching out the pension, which you hear a lot about, or by tweaking free cash. I mean, free cash is a misnomer the way people use it, because it's not actually, for the most part, free cash. What I would also
It's
say,
not free and it's not cash. In fact, it's
if you look
it's
at
unallocated fund balance.
if you look at its uses, you could easily say a whole lot of that should just be in the budget. So it's not truly
it's how we fund our
surplus.
capital plan.
Exactly.
It's not surplus at all.
and
It's anticipated in our
Let me just
budget
say
process.
one other thing, because there's, it's very easy to get comfortable saying, well, we need an override. So I'm someone who's worked on the yes side for 3 overrides. I'm generally very supportive of overrides. They are unbelievably difficult to pass. We passed it in like 02 or 03 with 52% of the vote, and in 2013...
You've already said Mark Laredo doesn't want to do things with 52%. Well, you said he doesn't want to do it with 51% of the vote.
I'll let Mark speak to overrides. And in 2013, when we had the wind at our back to pass an override in every possible way, we had 3 questions, 2 debt exclusions, and an operating, and they each had 54 or 55%. That is the high water mark for passing an override in Newton with everything going our way. So you have to have a whole bunch of things lined up before, and Mark has talked about this, before you even think of going to the voters for an override. And those things don't just magically line up. They're not just saying things. You have to have your finances in order so you can say to voters, this is all going to be for new things, as one example. Last thing I want to say, there is this wonderful yet false comfort in the notion that we're going to just do a bunch of debt exclusions and that'll be easier to pass than operatings. So I have polling data from the overrides I've worked on, and maybe it'll be different now. In a place as large as Newton, those debt exclusions work a whole lot better in smaller municipalities where everybody
Also,
is using the same.
it doesn't go into the base. It comes back down again. So
But
it doesn't get you
those
there.
debt exclusions
It's not
do
an
not
answer.
poll as well as an override, as an operating override. There's specific reasons for that.
In Newton,
And
they don't.
They don't in Newton. Now, they might
But
in
also, they're
smaller
not as. That's
municipalities.
because Newton voters are smart and understand that it's a Band-Aid, not a fix.
Not necessarily. I mean, and it could be as simple as people on one side of the city want their school, they're this or they're that, and people on the other side of the city want their this or they're that. I mean, you could look at the debt exclusions that just passed in 2 ways. One is they ran 7 points ahead of the operating, which lost. The other way is they barely passed, and there was super compelling reasons for them to pass, and it's really, really difficult to pass debt exclusions. There is no panacea. There is no simple fix. Words may give people a false sense of comfort.
But Lisa's running for office, so I want to hear the panacea and the simple fix, Lisa. What do we do here?
Well, Matt
There's
just said
choices
off the
that
top
need
of
to be
his
made.
head the thing that in all city council races, when people start talking about the budget, they talk about the different levers. They talk about funding the OPEB 8 years early, the pensions. They talk about efficiencies and looking at, maybe we don't need to send, notices in every water bill for 8 years about that people didn't read. I'm just saying there's different, we need to maybe look at
That'll
data.
save millions.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
People
say a lot of
everybody
silly
comes out,
things.
and I think, I'm not going to say it better than Matt, which is that it's really complicated, and I am not going to be able to come up with the exact answer on how we're going to fix the budget.
Well, let me ask you this.
I can answer being an advocate, and
Okay,
I do
well-
think there are things we can do about the commercial.
Okay, yeah. Matt has said, well, gosh, there isn't that much demand for commercial. Is that your experience?
I was disappointed that the Northland took the buildings that were commercial and that they were going to develop and got permission to not make them commercial any longer.
And didn't this just happen again just last week?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, I
Or
don't know about
Riverside.
last week.
Riverside, or
Oh,
it's
no, I was talking
Yeah.
about the Northland special permit.
right.
which-
No, in Riverside,
and
they
then-
just had a public hearing last week.
There are a
Same
number
story.
of people who have offices in Boston, and they commute. They have businesses in Boston, and my husband's company is also an example of a business that was thriving in Newton but moved to the seaport. And we don't make any effort to understand why people are leaving. We don't make an effort to say, what is the rent you're paying in Boston, and would you rather have your business in Newton? We don't do any of that data collecting. We don't have any of those discussions. I've informally had those, and I've talked to people who own companies who are in Boston who say they would love to come to Newton. They don't have the right spaces for them in Newton. And we've lost Shark, we lost TripAdvisor, we lost Continuum, which is where my husband worked. And we don't go to them and say, well, why? What is it that you need? And we have an economic development person, and he spends his time working with college students to work on how we can take properties that aren't for sale and turn them into housing. Meanwhile, we have businesses with empty storefronts, and nobody, I do this, but that's just because I care about local businesses. I try to find businesses that will move in. So I've had discussions with Brothers, that's owned by Roach Brothers. I've had discussions with companies that I say, this would be a great opportunity for you to come into Newton, but that really should be the job of the person that we're actually paying to look at commercial businesses in Newton. We could also stop hurting our businesses. During the pandemic, Roxy, that was over in Newtonville, had major construction going on in front of it. There was zero effort to put up signage to let people know it was still open. They lost a ton of business. I could start going into ways we could support our businesses. I will say one last thing, which is in Newton Center, and I think around Newton, we have those wonderful street cafes that are very European, aside from the fact that we have giant cars driving by us. In Europe, they're smaller. And it started out that the Jersey barriers were supplied by the city, and that worked out beautifully. Then the next step came, and it said, well, we're not going to supply the Jersey barriers. You have to get them yourself. But they kept changing the sizes that people could have. And they're investing in the wood to make the decks.
Sure.
Now they have to buy their own, but they have no place to store them. And nobody is talking to them about how to store them or where to store them. They're all now stuck having invested. And I've been told that every single year since that program started, there's been a change. And every single change has cost those businesses money. And that's not the way either to support your local businesses. I think we could do a much better job of finding out what those needs are and how we can help them. And that then goes into like our city website, which I think is atrocious and would be the place that you could really work on supporting. What restaurant am I going? Where's a list of all the restaurants in Newton? Well, P.S. it's all over Newton, which is done by a private person, and she does an amazing job, but it should be supplemented.
All right, I think I'm going to wrap up this topic, put my 2 cents in, give an assessment of how we did at Finding Common Ground, and introduce the next topic. So
We disagree on anything?
well, maybe you emphasize
Maybe
different
Ken
things. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna say this. I don't think I think Lisa made a fabulous point in saying that we aren't necessarily providing the kinds of commercial spaces that people out there in the world actually want. I don't think it's really rocket science here. You got 2 things going on. Your revenue's going up at 2.5% plus new growth, but it's much higher for commercial than residential. We're squeezing that by having our percentage of revenue, our percentage of property that's commercial going down. There's only 2 things you can do to fix the fundamental problem. You can either increase your percentage of real estate in the city that's commercial, or you can periodically raise property taxes through an override. As Matt points out, it's very difficult to pass an override. It's also difficult in the current environment to change that ratio because the current environment is entirely reactive. In other words, it's developer driven. If we had a mayor, a leader, with a vision and a proactive planning department that said, hey, let's figure out what kind of businesses would like to locate in Newton, and let's take some land, let's redevelop it proactively, and let's meet that need. If hypothetically there were such a visionary leader on the horizon, I think we could make huge strides. I mean, I'll give you one example. I'm a lawyer. A lot of lawyers are in Newton, who live in Newton. Most of them are at bigger firms. They're commuting to downtown. Not good for the environment, except the days they get to work from home, right? But also, and they're right there on the south, South Boston, down that east part of downtown that used to be a giant parking lot and is now buildings.
Seaport.
Seaport. Thank you. Seaport. Thank you for the word. In the Seaport area, and they're all going down there. Why can't those law firms relocate to Newton? I'll tell you why. Because there isn't a plan. You need a critical mass of Class A office space, and we have crappy office space in Newton. We have very little quality office space and nothing big enough to accommodate them. Wouldn't it be better if the lawyers from Newton and Wellesley and Needham and all those places, instead of going all the way downtown, could go to Newton and we'd get the tax revenue? Of course it would be, but we haven't had the planning. We've had a lack of imagination, a lack of leadership, and a very reactive planning department. That could all change, and that is easily remedied. I want to go to our last topic now and let each of you answer a critical question. We're going to get a new mayor. What I want to know is, how are things going to change with a new mayor and a new city council? And I'm going to let Lisa go first to say, I will put it this way: if you could, you're going to be a legislator if you get elected. If you could change any one law, any one ordinance in the city of Newton, what would it be? What law, if you had the ability to change an ordinance, what would you like to see change that we can come back in 2 years and go, did you get that ordinance changed?
Oh my goodness.
You want to think about that a second while I ask Matt, for what's going to be different with Mark Laredo? What
Can
policy?
I have that question? No.
No. What policy will be different with Mark Laredo? Not style, not consensus building. What policy will actually be different in the city of Newton with Mark Laredo as mayor than in our current administration?
I would expect Mark to be very open to rethinking funding allocations for certain policies right now. That's not me saying what Mark's going to do.
Which policies?
There are certain policy choices that every mayor makes. Mm-hmm. Pension allocations, for example. Mm-hmm. Those are not unilateral decisions for a mayor to make. I mean, there's an independent pension board that has fiduciary responsibilities. Mm-hmm. But if a mayor wants to negotiate a deal, I think Mark is open to looking at that. That's not the same thing as saying Mayor Fuller has been wrong in doing something. Okay. Mark, for example, has a different
not judging.
view.
He has his own ideas that he wants to. It's like Harris could have brought her own ideas in without criticizing Biden, right?
Yeah. So and I think Mayor Fuller's kind of set the table for Mark in a lot of ways to have kind of the ability to rethink certain things by doing some of the heavy lifting herself. I will say, though, that there's a limit to how much can be totally different in any municipality like Newton. And I think the tone issue is really important.
I know you care about that tone issue. I'm going to give Lisa a chance to say, what's an ordinance? Is it the tree ordinance? Give me an ordinance that
Does it have to be? Because what I'd really like to see is I would really like to see traffic council no longer. I would like to see traffic go back to public safety and transportation.
That's an ordinance change. That would require an ordinance change.
Yeah, okay.
That's legislation.
Yes, no, I knew this, but that is something that I would very much like to see.
So explain in 30 seconds what that means.
I think that traffic and sidewalks and how we move about the city is vitally important, and I think that not having our legislators make those decisions and outsourcing them to a group of people who are not elected, who are who have barely any resident representation, has been one of the worst decisions that has been made since I've been back in Newton.
Okay, I need to wrap up the show, but I will drink to that. I was there when that bad decision was made. I voted against it, by the way. But anyway, thank you both very much for being on the show. Thank you, Matt. It's always a pleasure.
Ken. It's good to see you again.
Lisa, delighted to have you here. Your first time, so you did a fabulous job, and I know you'll do a fabulous job as a city councilor. I'm so proud to to be supporting you and excited to seeing you running. And I know that you'll do very well for the city. So, and I, of course, Matt, I'm so happy that you got our buddy Mark to throw his hat in the ring. I'll give you some
He
credit.
did it on
for
his
that.
own.
I know he did, but it takes. No one can run for office on their own, especially an office like mayor. You need your friends there. You've been his treasurer for a lot of years, and without that kind of friendship and support, I mean, I ran for mayor once, a long time ago. You can't do it without the backing of people like you, Matt.
We're lucky to have him as the next mayor. So it's exciting, and we're lucky. And he's lucky to be able to lead this city.
It's a great place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, drink to that one, too. So, and thank you for joining us tonight on Common